States of
questions to move on
America
to. Thank you.
under this
The
name.
next subject, the next is that of immigration, and I'll start with you, Mr. Ball. You've made it a major component of your platform. You're on record as saying you support Arizona's immigration law. I would like to bring it to New York. You sponsor proposed legislation that would require a bail hearing no sooner than 72 hours after bail application for a person presumed to be an illegal alien. By the way, it was proposed that no members of even your own party would touch. Explain for the audience how you can pick out who you presume to be legal or illegal by
I'm going to tell you right now that that's not a direct quote from me at all, and it's part of a 287G. But I'll tell you exactly what I do support, and what I do support in the illegal immigration is illegal. My opponent can act like it's not an issue.
But with all due respect, Mr.
fine.
Ball, A6746 was the proposed legislation submitted. It would require, quote, a bail hearing no sooner than 72 hours after bail application for person presumed to be an illegal alien.
Exactly. Now let me tell you exactly what it would do. It's a 287G program. We have in New York State a large population of criminally illegal aliens that even after they serve term at taxpayer expense are then many times released back on the streets to commit crimes again instead of serving time in their own nation's jail. This would allow federal officials to immediately work with local law enforcement to initiate, as soon as possible, deportation procedures. But at no time, okay, they're either illegal or illegally here. If they're illegally here, that deportation retainer will then be gotten by local law enforcement.
But we're skipping the key word, which is presumed.
Yeah.
Like in Arizona, how do you, with naked eyesight, presume who's legal or illegal?
The Arizona law is a law that came from a local and a state government to deal with a federal flawed policy that allows 1 million illegal aliens, by some estimates, to cross the border every year, while at the same time forcing 6 to 7 million totally legal immigrants to wait in line for an average of 6 to 7 years. Local law enforcement in court, and I'm going to tell you that local law enforcement,
I'm sorry, Mr. Ball, continue.
Local law enforcement working in coordination with our federal government would ascertain whether the individual was legal or illegal. All this does is expedite that process so dangerous criminals, we're not talking about illegal aliens, dangerous criminals do not fall through our hands. We have had deaths, we have had murders, we have had rapes.
But with all due respect,
in this
Mr. Ball,
district.
I'm not quantifying what our immigration policy should or shouldn't be. What I'm trying to just ascertain is the key word in this is presume, and you're not trying to expedite it. You're trying to postpone by 72 hours a bail proceeding that otherwise would have continued sooner if that person were of any other status.
That bill very specifically and very deliberatively expedites the time frame of communication between the federal government and the local law enforcement. The reality is that because of their inherent status as an illegal alien, they're an inherent flight risk. If we get a parking ticket, that parking ticket follows us. As an illegal alien, many times they're allowed back out on the streets even after being convicted of dangerous crimes. We have to deport criminal illegal aliens who are in the state before they strike again. It's a very serious issue. Okay. I'll also fight for a statewide E-Verify law to crack down on illegal hiring and illegal housing.
That's a perfect segue, sir, to bring in my question for Mr. Kaplowitz. I know you don't support the piece of legislation we just discussed, but I want to know where your line is.
Yes, thank you.
Wait, but I'll be specific. What should illegal immigrants be eligible for in New York State when it comes to employment, housing, driver's license? What do you believe the state of New York should ascertain about legal status before you'd allow any of these documents or rights afforded to?
There's a very clear distinction in so many of these areas between my opponent and I. And on illegal immigration, his promise, the twin pillar of what he was going to do when he became a state assemblyman, is solve the illegal immigration problem and curb our property taxes. How are we doing with those two, Greg? Not so well. On the illegal immigration, unless Mr. Ball and his relatives came over the Bering Strait, I'm thinking about 40,000 years ago, Mr. Ball and his family, and thank God they're here, along with my family and so many others, are Americans. And we all came as immigrants. His race baiting, his immigrant baiting is not productive and is not constructive. Illegal immigration is illegal in that a country that cannot defend its border has given up its sovereignty. And in fact, you cannot have a porous border. No country can, no country should. But here's the difference between the two. He pretends he can do something about it. I recognize the federal government has not. They've abrogated, and they need to come up with a solution. So what do I do as a New York State Senator? I take a common sense approach, not an ideological approach. He spent about 2 minutes trying to deal with one word and not answer your question, because he can't. He's the bookend of this issue. If he wants to round up 13 million people, good luck. It's inhumane, and more importantly, it's not common sense. We got to deal with this problem. And the answer to your question, sir, in terms of benefits, and what sticks in the craw of all of us, is that people are here illegally, they cut the line, and people are here taking services that they're not paying towards. So what is my solution? A common sense solution. And we take it as we go, and we put people who want to work on the books legally, paying taxes, so that in fact they're not mooching the system, but contributing towards the system. So what will I do as a New York State Senator? I will support an anti-mooch policy of making sure people are common sense on the books, and if they're here, we can't round them up.
Let me be specific, because my
Yes, sir.
specific question, if I try it again, was, should an employer require proof of citizenship before employment?
They already do. In many industries and in many ways they do, and the answer is yes.
Okay.
The answer is,
Secondly,
and this is not,
should a person be able to go to the DMV and get a license without proof of citizenship?
I did absolutely not. Did not support that, especially in a world where you can utilize that for purposes of exit, transit into a country and out of a country. No, I did not support that plan and would not support that plan as a direct answer. Thank you, sir.
I would very seriously like to make a follow-up point.
I promise, though, you'll have an opportunity in your closing statements.
Mike
We have to
Kaplowitz-
get
Mike
through. We only have about
Kaplowitz-
20
if
minutes
you let
left,
him,
Mr.
I will
Ball.
be
Go
happy
right
to
ahead.
follow up to the
Karen
follow-up
asked,
if
and
you
then
Mike
want to do
Kaplowitz
that.
called me a racist tonight.
Okay.
I want an opportunity to
Well,
respond.
Go ahead. Karen, go ahead.
okay, well, I'm going to move on to a very, very simple question for you both. Term limits.
Yes.
Do you think the time has come for term limits for all statewide elected officials and members of the Senate and Assembly? And what do you think those term limits should be? Mr. Kaplowitz, I'll ask you
Yes,
first.
absolutely. We have term limits. They're called elections, fair and vigorous. And ladies and gentlemen, we have the chance, after 2 years, to term limit out, if you choose, Assemblyman Ball. That's the democratic way. Second point. Term limits are a means to get to a goal. The goal is ethical, good government and legislators that are working. An independent redistricting program does that. I was the first to sign on to that among the two of us. I've signed all in pledges, Mayor Koch and the like, to say, and Mayor Giuliani, that we need fair, independent redistricting. That will create fair fights. That will create the democracy that we need. The major problem with term limits is, and the structural problem that eats away like a boll weevil in cotton, is the leadership in Albany. When you are in the Assembly for year after year after year, and you only are accountable to your membership, then the rest of us be darned. That's the problem. I support leadership term limits. Legislators can then vote for new leaders. That knowledge that there will be new leaders, we did that at the county. I voluntarily gave up. This gentleman doesn't even know my record. He didn't foil it until recently.
Mr.
I was
Kaplowitz,
budget chairman for 4 years.
you
I
did-
voluntarily gave up budget chairman
You didn't
because it
answer
was
my
time for
question, though,
others.
so you do not support term limits.
Absolutely. It's called vigorous and fair elections. It's called independent redistricting.
That wasn't my
It's
question.
called
Okay, thank you.
leadership term
Thank you,
limits
sir.
for leadership. And if you ask me for term
Thank you,
limits
sir.
for legislators, my answer is no, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank-
Mr. Balk, same question to you.
It's once again, Mike Kaplowitz has been, Tax Like Mike has been tap dancing all over this stage. I support term limits. I term limited myself as an assemblyman. You know, many politicians make promises and then they don't follow through with them. I absolutely support term limits. As county legislator, there are county legislators in Westminster County right now, a bipartisan coalition that has formed to term limit county legislators. You will not even sign that term limit pledge. The number one reform initiative that we can pass in Albany to change the culture of corruption, a culture that really subsidizes incumbency and incompetency, is to pass term limits. And for the first time in a long time, because of the climate that's out there, we can get term limit legislation passed either for committee chairs or for the actual legislative
And what
term.
should those term limits be, sir?
I personally would like to see anything between 6 to 10 years. I think that that's probably too long, but I think that we can probably get that done. As the next state senator in this district, the first thing that I'm going to do, even before being sworn in, is to reach across the aisle and build a reform caucus, 3 to 4 Democrats, 3 to 4 Republicans, and agree to pass term limits, to fight to pass term limits, to cap property taxes, free school taxes for seniors, and eliminate the loopholes that allow these individuals to use
Okay,
their public
thank you.
positions
Thank
for
you,
their
Mr. Ball.
private benefit.